My name is Arden Calloway, 34 years old. I landed in Boston with 8 months of Philadelphia grit still clinging to me. Coffee breath, suitcase wheel that wobbled, a draft set I couldn't stop rehearsing in my head, and counted the minutes to the quiet of my Back Bay townhouse, the one I'd bought on stubbornness and takeout nights. Commonwealth Avenue was wet and slick, late rain polishing the brownstones into mirror glass. I turned onto my block and braked so hard the rental chirped. A moving truck idled against my curb, hazard lights pulsing like an alarm no one else could hear. 2 men in navy overalls hustled a mid-century dresser up my steps. My dresser. I pulled behind the truck, grabbed my keys without thinking, and jogged to the stoop. The brass number, 47, was where it had always been. I pushed my key into the lock and felt it stick against a new cylinder. My key, the one I'd hidden in planters and handed to dog walkers and turned in my palms like a rosary during bad weeks, refused me. The door opened anyway from inside. A woman in her 40s in a slate blazer looked me over like I was a delivery. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice clipped, polite the way a bouncer is polite. "This is my house," I said. "I'm Arden Calloway." Something in her face shifted, surprise, then pity that made me want to burn the street down. She called over her shoulder, "Mark?" A man appeared behind her with a folder, the kind of thick, squared-off paper confidence that looks better under fluorescent light. He held it out the way a waiter holds a wine list. Deed, title, sale date, 2 months ago. Buyers, Mark and Lena Wexler. Sale price, $500,000. "I never sold my house," I said. It came out flat, which felt wrong because everything in me was sharp and panicked and hot. "We closed with a power of attorney on your behalf," he said, tapping a tab. "It was all very expedited." He tried to smile. "I'm sorry." Behind them I saw my floors, sanded oak I'd chosen and paid for board by board, catching a stranger's footsteps. A toddler squealed somewhere, tiny sneakers pattering. The hallway smelled like someone else's detergent and lemon cleaner instead of my books and cedar. My chest went tight. I stepped back onto the stoop because the alternative was asking a stranger to step aside so I could check if the scratch in the second riser was still there. "Your belongings were set out per the agreement," the woman added gently, pointing down the steps. I turned. Trash bags lined the curb, heavy with rain. Black plastic ovals sagged with the weight of my life. When I ripped one open, water sloshed over my shoes, cold and oily. Sketchbooks fanned like dead fish. Graphite smears, curled corners, building sections I'd labored over, now blurred. My RISD portfolio sleeves, split. A mason jar of sea glass, from a summer I'd forgotten to mourn. I found my grandmother's necklace in a damp knot, the clasp fuzzy with tarnish. A framed photo slid out and landed face up on the wet concrete. Me at 26, grinning in front of my first finished library, hair frizzed by rain, then, too. The glass was spiderwebbed. The me in the photo looked like she might fall through it. "Where's my car?" I heard myself demand. "Black sedan. Came with the house?" "Nothing about a car," the man said, already retreating. My phone felt too small in my hand. I called my parents. No answer. I called again, then my brother. Voicemail. The automated voice telling me to leave a message sounded kinder than anything I'd heard in hours. I hung up, scrolled, called again as if repetition could conjure morality. Voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. I stalked back to the folder the man still held. "Let me see the authorization." He hesitated and then surrendered 2 stapled pages. The language blurred until I forced my eyes to slow. Power of attorney. Arden Elise Calloway. Grants to George and Pamela Calloway. My name there in neat type, and at the bottom, my signature, my swoop on the A, the impatient straight line through the last Y, notarized, 6 months ago. Memory flashed, brutal and bright. My parents in my kitchen before I left for Philadelphia, Mom chattering about maintenance forms and tax deduct. "What is it, Georgie?" "Deductions." Dad tapping his phone saying, "Just sign here, kiddo. You'll miss your flight." My suitcase open on the rug. My laptop chiming with a Teams ping. The stack of papers I didn't read because Mom's eyes were shining at being helpful. I felt the phantom weight of a pen in my hand then. I felt it now like an accusation. A bus sighed to a stop across the street. A couple under one umbrella skirted the trash bags, the woman glancing, sympathy snarled with rubbernecking. I crouched and started sorting with mechanical focus. Save, toss, save. Save was mostly memory. My grad school pin-up photos, a chipped mug from a job site, a single shoe I didn't know I'd missed. Toss was saturated prints, a sweater that smelled like mold already, a stack of project schedules illegible with ink bleed. My breath fogged, my fingertips went numb. "Ma'am," one mover said, not unkind, "we can help carry these to your car if you need." He had the careful tone of a man who's learned the difference between intervening and intruding. "Thanks," I said, and stood too fast. I needed answers I wasn't going to get on a sidewalk. I needed a lock that opened, and a family who believed in asking. Instead, I had a rain-sucked pile and a signature I didn't remember making count for this. I walked back to the rental, slammed the door harder than the car deserved, and watched the house through the wipers. Inside, a stranger set down a vase on the mantel I'd installed, centered, and recentered until perfection clicked. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, project review, 9 a.m., and the absurd normalcy of it made me bark a laugh that had no humor in it at all. I dialed my parents again. Voicemail. I texted my mother, "Call me now." 3 dots appeared like a pulse, then vanished. The absence felt louder than the moving truck. I put the car in drive and circled the block, brain racing. The papers, the timing, the price. $500,000 on a property that would have fetched more if anyone had been patient. And the car, my car, sold or transferred with some other printed lie? The lock changed. The deed stamped, recorded, done. The word expedited chafed like sand in a shoe. At the second stop sign, my eyes landed on a smear of orange on my windshield, trapped under the wiper, an old parking garage monthly pass I'd forgotten to cancel when I went to Philly. I slid it free. Beacon Garage. Authorized. Payer, A. Calloway, it read, with my mother's email listed below mine, smaller, parentheses, billing contact. A thread tugged loose in my head. Authorized payer. Not exactly fraud, not exactly consent. Slippery. The kind of gray my father liked to surf until it turned black and he shrugged like tides weren't real. I parked again, got out, and took photos of everything. The deed, the names, the signature, the bags, the number 47 shining under street lamps that now looked like interrogation. Then I tucked the cracked photo of 26-year-old me into my coat like a talisman against this version of the street, this version of my name on paper I never meant. The rental's heater roared when I cranked it. I sat with my hands on the wheel and let the heat sting my wet knuckles until I could hear my own thoughts again. They weren't pretty. They were sharp and simple and ended at the same place, Newton. Their white-shuttered colonial had been a postcard long before my townhouse was a dream. I knew the drive by heart. I knew which lane I needed before the Mass Pike bent, where the asphalt buckled near the exit, which stoplight refused to turn when you prayed. I also knew that if I went to a hotel to sleep and breathe and be rational, I'd spend the night staring at a ceiling while the shape of my grandmother's necklace flashed behind my eyes, and the morning would bring me exactly what the night would. The same locked door, the same wet bags, the same silence. The city unspooled in wet ribbons as I pulled away from the curb. When I hit a red light, my phone lit, unknown number, and I almost didn't answer, but hope is stubborn. "Ms. Calloway?" A woman's voice, professional, too bright. "This is Janine with Commonwealth Title, just confirming receipt of your closing packet from 6 months ago. Our office is always here if you need copies of the..." I hung up before I could say something that would be played later and judged. My hands shook on the wheel. 6 months ago. The month with the papers, and my mother pushing a pen toward me and saying, "It's just easier if we handle things while you're away." The month I'd been proud of being efficient enough to be trusting. The month that had just stolen my house. I took Storo faster than I should have. Wind shoved at the car, and the Charles on my right looked like hammered metal under the low sky. I thought of Gavin as a kid, grinning wide with a jaw you couldn't be mad at, and hands that took without malice and kept without apology. I thought of Gavin last year, voice tight, asking for money, just this once, and me saying no with a steadiness that had surprised us both. I thought of my father's voice on my birthday, "You're doing so well, Arden," and the way he made well sound like something he could spend. When the green sign for Newton appeared, my stomach flipped. I turned off the radio because the chatter felt like lying. The houses along their street had the same lawns they'd always had, the same tasteful wreaths, the same stone walls. My parents' porch light was on, a beacon for people who believe home is a fixed point. I pulled into their driveway and cut the engine. For a moment, the only sound was the tick of cooling metal. I could see them through the front window, silhouettes in the living room, the tilt of my mother's head, the square set of my father's shoulders. They looked exactly like parents in a painting, which is to say, safe and familiar, and impossible to step into without the sense you might ruin the frame. I took the cracked photo out of my pocket and looked at the younger me one more time. The rain had dried in fractured lines across my smile. "You built your way out," I told her under my breath. "You can build again. But first, you get your answers." I slipped the photo back into my coat, opened the car door, and walked up the flagstone path. The porch light hummed. I didn't knock. The knob turned easily under my hand. My parents' living room smelled of fresh coffee and lemon polish, as if nothing in the world had cracked. The familiarity of it hit harder than the betrayal, the soft ticking of the mantel clock, the framed family photo where Gavin wore that lopsided grin, the crocheted throw my mother insisted tied the whole room together. They were there, just as I'd seen from the driveway. Dad in his favorite leather chair, mug in hand, expression already tightening when he spotted me. Mom perched on the edge of the sofa, back straight, hands folded like she'd been rehearsing calm. The sight of me in the doorway made her startle, a porcelain teacup rattling against its saucer. "Arden," she said, as if I'd come home for Sunday brunch instead of storming in from the wreckage of my life. "You scared me. Why didn't you call first? Why did you sell my house?" My voice was sharp enough that I barely recognized it. The silence stretched. Dad set down his mug, slow, deliberate, like buying himself seconds. "What are you talking about?" he said, though his eyes didn't blink, didn't shift. I stepped into the room, wet shoes squeaking against their hardwood. "Don't play games. My townhouse, gone. My car, gone. Trash bags of my life, sitting on the curb in the rain. Sold for $500,000. You had my keys. You had the papers." Mom's hands started twisting together, her knuckles whitening. She glanced at Dad as though asking permission to speak. He said nothing. Finally, her voice trembled. "We had no choice, Arden." The words landed like a slap. No choice. "What kind of trouble?" I demanded, though Gavin's shadow already crowded the room. Dad leaned forward, jaw set, every inch the patriarch who thought raising his voice could make his version the truth. "Your brother owed money, serious money, $500,000, gambling." My chest squeezed so tight I thought I might crack. I wanted to laugh or maybe scream. "So you sold my house? Without asking? Without even calling me?" Mom reached out, her eyes pleading. "He was in danger, Arden. Real danger. People were threatening him. He's your brother. We thought you'd understand." Understand. That word rang like a cruel joke. They had thrown away everything I built and expected me to nod along. "You threw my things in the trash," I said, my voice shaking now, though not from fear. "My sketches, Grandma's necklace, my memories. You didn't just sell a building, you sold me." Dad stood abruptly, towering, his voice rising. "Don't be selfish. Family comes first. Gavin needed us. He's your priority," I cut in, venom sharp enough to silence him. "He's always been your priority, since we were kids. My bike fund gone so he could have a game console. My college fees ignored while you paid for his Mustang. Every chance, every bailout, every excuse. And now this." Mom's face crumpled, tears spilling fast, but I wasn't moved. I'd seen those tears before, always for Gavin, never for me. "You think sacrificing me is family?" I whispered. "That's not loyalty. That's betrayal." Dad jabbed a finger toward me. "Watch your tone. We raised you. We gave you everything." "No," I snapped, stepping closer, fists clenched. "I gave you everything. My trust, my signature, my home. And you handed it to him like I was nothing. Do you even hear yourselves? You didn't save him. You sold me." The mantel clock chimed the quarter hour. The sound cut through the silence, absurdly cheerful against the storm hanging in the room. "I'm not letting this go," I said finally, voice calm now. Too calm. Not this time. You crossed a line, and I'm taking it to court. Mom gasped, horrified. Court? Arden, you can't sue your own family. Dad's face went hard, a wall slamming shut. You're overreacting. We'll figure it out. I shook my head, already stepping back toward the door. No, you figured it out when you sold my life without asking. You'll see me in court. Mom grabbed my arm in the last second, her touch desperate, trembling. Please, Arden, don't do this. We're your parents. We love you. I pulled free, my voice cold. Family doesn't do this to each other. I walked out, her sob echoing behind me, my father's silence heavier than stone. The night air slapped me awake as I crossed their porch. My chest was tight, my pulse a drumbeat, but beneath the rage was something sharper, resolve. If they thought they could bury me under Gavin's debts and call it family, they hadn't seen anything yet. And I had no idea the next phone call would change everything. That night, I didn't go back to a home because I didn't have one anymore. Instead, I checked into a downtown hotel, the kind with starched sheets and impersonal art on the walls. I sat at the edge of the bed, my suitcase at my feet, staring at the cracked frame I'd salvaged from the trash pile. It was a photo from my very first job, me beaming in front of a library I'd designed. I remembered the pride swelling in my chest that day, how I'd thought my parents might finally see me. They didn't come. They were at Gavin's big pitch for some business that collapsed before it began. I turned the photo over in my hands, my breath unsteady. The anger clawing at me wasn't just about the house or the car. It was about years, decades of being second. Memories surged. I was 10 years old, counting every crumpled dollar in my lemonade stand jar. I wanted a red bike more than anything. Gavin, 13, found the jar and emptied it in one swoop. I need a new game console, he'd shrugged. I ran to Mom, sobbing, expecting justice. She hugged me, whispered, He's your brother, Arden. Share a little. In high school, I waited tables on weekends to pay for art classes, dreaming of becoming an architect. Gavin got a car for his 16th birthday. A month later, drunk, he crashed it. My parents paid for the repairs without blinking. When I asked for help with my class fees, Dad had said, You're smart, Arden. You'll figure it out. And I did. Scholarships, double shifts, sleepless nights. Meanwhile, Gavin dropped out of college, floated through failed ventures, a bar, a tech startup, a landscaping business, each one funded with my parents' money. When he begged me for $10,000 years later, I gave him half. He never paid me back. When I finally said no, he called me selfish and stormed out. Now, sitting in that hotel room, I realized my parents hadn't betrayed me overnight. They'd been training me my whole life to accept less, to sacrifice, to come second. But I wasn't a child anymore, and this time they had underestimated me. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Arden, it's Julie Morgan. I know what happened to your house. Meet me at the Thinking Cup, 2 p.m. Julie, Gavin's ex. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she walked away from the chaos. My stomach twisted. Why now? Curiosity cut sharper than caution. I typed back a single word. Okay. At 2 p.m., I pushed open the cafe door. The air smelled of espresso and sugar. Julie sat in a corner booth, her dark hair pulled into a low knot, her nurse's scrubs replaced with jeans and a jacket. She looked older, sharper, like someone who'd carried too many secrets. I slid into the seat across from her. What's this about? Her fingers tightened on her coffee mug. I heard about your house, Arden. I'm sorry. But you need to know, it wasn't just sold, it was forged. My stomach dropped. Forged? She pulled out her phone, scrolled, and turned the screen toward me. An email. A scanned power of attorney with my signature at the bottom, dated 6 months ago. It authorized my parents to sell my townhouse and car. My chest went cold. That's not possible. Then it hit me. Mom, standing in my kitchen before I left for Philadelphia. A neat stack of papers in her hands. Just some maintenance documents, fam, she'd said, her smile too quick. I'd been packing, distracted, signing without reading. My pulse roared in my ears. They played me. Julie slid a small USB drive across the table. This has everything. Emails from Gavin bragging, texts about the debt, the notary who signed off without you there. Use it. I picked up the drive, my fingers trembling. Why are you giving me this? Her eyes softened, tired. Because I've been there. Gavin used me too. He borrowed money, lied, left me in pieces. When I heard what your parents did, I couldn't stay quiet. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, fury simmering beneath my skin. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd orchestrated it, forged my name, sold my life. Julie's voice was quiet but firm. Go after them, Arden. Don't let them win. I slipped the USB into my pocket, my jaw tight. She was right. I needed someone who could fight this, someone I trusted, and I knew exactly who to call. Benjamin Larson's office sat on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place where everything smelled faintly of polished wood and ink. He was the one person I trusted to see me without judgment, my closest friend from college, now a sharp, steady lawyer with a reputation for being relentless in court. I dropped the USB drive on his desk, my voice low but urgent. This has everything Julie gave me. Emails, texts, the forged power of attorney. They stole my house, Ben, my car, everything. He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a beat. His gaze was calm, but his jaw tightened. Forging a power of attorney? That's fraud. If this checks out, it's not just betrayal, it's criminal. He plugged in the drive, screens filled with Gavin's cocky emails, bragging about fixing the paperwork, texts about owing $500,000 to dangerous people. Then the document appeared, the power of attorney with my signature. Ben looked up. Were you in Boston the day this was notarized? No, I was already in Philadelphia working. He pulled up the notary's name from the file, his brows knitting. And this guy certified it anyway. That's a felony. I leaned forward, my voice shaking but steady. Can we prove it? His mouth curved into the faintest, fiercest smile. We can subpoena the notary's bank records. If your parents bribed him, it'll show. As he spoke, a memory flashed. Mom's nervous laugh as I scribbled my signature on that stack of maintenance papers. Dad scrolling on his phone in the corner. They'd planned it. Waited until I was distracted, until I trusted them enough not to look too closely. Bile rose in my throat. They knew exactly what they were doing. Before Ben could respond, my phone buzzed. Aunt Carol's name lit the screen, my father's older sister. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice came through, trembling. Arden, I heard you're thinking about suing your parents. Please, don't do this. They were desperate. Gavin's life was on the line. My grip on the phone tightened. They forged my signature. They sold my life to pay off his mess. And you're asking me not to do this? They're your family, she pleaded. You can rebuild. Don't tear them apart. I let out a bitter laugh. Rebuild? While they toss everything I built into the rain? No, Aunt Carol, they made this choice. I'm done cleaning it up. I hung up, my hands shaking, fury and heartbreak tangling in my chest. Ben's voice cut through, calm but unwavering. This won't be easy. Suing your parents will get messy. Relatives will take sides. Some will call you ungrateful. Some will cut you off. I met his eyes, my voice steady. They made it messy when they forged my name. I want justice, Ben, not revenge. Justice. He nodded, already scribbling notes. Then we move forward. Fraud, conversion of property, conspiracy. We'll build it airtight. For the first time since I'd stood on my rain-soaked curb, I felt something flicker inside me. Control. They had stolen everything, but I was taking it back. And this time I wasn't going to lose. 2 weeks later, I stood outside the Suffolk County Courthouse, my blazer stiff against the crisp Boston air. The city buzzed around me. Horns, footsteps, the hum of life. But all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of varnished wood and tension. At the defense table sat my parents, George and Pamela, faces pale, hands clasped too tightly. Beside them, Gavin slouched in his chair, eyes fixed on the floor. For once, the swagger was gone. Benjamin leaned close, his voice low and steady. We've got this, Arden. Just breathe. I nodded, though my jaw was clenched so tight it ached. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a voice like steel, called the case. Benjamin rose first. Your Honor, this is not just a civil dispute. This is fraud. My client's parents forged a power of attorney, sold her townhouse and car, assets worth $500,000, without her consent. He projected the forged document onto the screen. My signature glared back at me, foreign and familiar all at once. The notary was the first witness, a man in his 50s, sweat beading at his temple. Under oath, his voice trembled. No, I didn't see Ms. Porter sign it. I was told she already had. Benjamin's tone cut like a blade. And did you receive a payment after notarizing this? The man hesitated, then nodded. Yes, $15,000, from an account linked to George Porter. A ripple of whispers filled the room. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's face hardened, stone and shame. Next came Julie Morgan. She walked with her spine straight, her voice clear. Gavin told me he owed $500,000 to a gambling ring. He bragged about using Arden's house to cover it. He even sent me emails about the forged papers. Benjamin submitted the USB, the text flashing across the screen. Gavin's words. Fixed it. Arden won't even know. Debt cleared. My stomach nodded as the judge's expression darkened. The defense lawyer tried to spin it, his voice dripping with pity. Your Honor, this family acted under duress. My clients feared for their son's life. They didn't intend harm. They intended survival. Benjamin didn't flinch. Survival doesn't excuse fraud. Love doesn't excuse theft. They deceived their own daughter, stripped her of everything she built to protect a son who's been shielded his whole life. That is not desperation. That is betrayal. The words hung heavy. Even the gallery went silent. The judge deliberated for what felt like an eternity. My palms were damp, my pulse loud in my ears. Then, at last, her gavel struck. The evidence is overwhelming. George and Pamela Porter are guilty of fraud and conspiracy. They are sentenced to 7 years in prison. Gavin Porter is sentenced to 4 years of probation and a $100,000 fine. The sound of Mom's sob broke the silence. Dad stared at the floor, unblinking. Gavin's face went ashen, his mouth opening, but no words forming. I sat frozen, tears blurring my vision. I had won. But as the bailiffs led my parents away, their shoulders hunched, their faces hollow, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the final fracture of something that had already been breaking for years. Benjamin touched my arm gently. It's over. But as I walked out into the cold Boston air, I realized it wasn't over. Not really. The trial was done. The damage, the betrayal, still lived in me, and now I had to figure out how to live without them. The morning after the verdict, I woke in my Beacon Hill apartment to sunlight filtering through the blinds. It wasn't the townhouse I'd poured my soul into, but it was mine, paid for with a loan and the scraps of savings I had left. The quiet felt strange, almost too clean, like the world was holding its breath after the storm. I brewed coffee, the scent filling the tiny kitchen, and stood at the window overlooking cobblestone streets. For the first time in months, there was no weight pressing me flat. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from my cousin Emily. Her voice was sharp, almost spitting through the speaker. Arden, how could you? You put your parents in prison. You've destroyed this family. I deleted it without replying. Minutes later, a text from Uncle David lit up the screen. You're heartless. Blood is thicker than money. My chest tightened, but my hand stayed steady as I blocked his number. I had shed too much already to let guilt sink its claws back in. I turned instead to the shelf where my salvaged sketchbook sat, pages warped from rain, but still legible. My fingers traced the drawings of skylights, libraries, homes I'd dreamed into existence, proof that what I built came from me, not from them, not for Gavin, for me. Later that week, Benjamin invited me for coffee. He grinned as I slid into the cafe booth. How's freedom treating you? I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh. Strange, like I've stepped out of a shadow I didn't know I was standing in. His expression softened. That's because for once you're not carrying anyone else's weight. That night, back in my apartment, I unpacked a small watercolor I'd bought at a market. Boston's skyline at dusk, brush strokes blurred but luminous. I hung it above my desk, the bare brick wall suddenly warmer. My phone pinged again, a text from Grandma. You did what no one else could. I'm proud of you. 14 words, but they cut deeper than all the accusations. My throat tightened, eyes burning. Grandma had always been quiet at family gatherings, watching more than speaking. Now I knew she had seen me all along. I typed back, "Thank you, Grandma." As I stood there, the city humming outside, a clarity settled over me. Justice wasn't just about the verdict or the years my parents would serve. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I had given away every time I'd said yes, every time I'd sacrificed without question. Family had demanded loyalty, but what they gave me was betrayal. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even broken. I was free.